The morning sun cast long shadows across Horse Guards Parade as Major General Christopher Geika adjusted his ceremonial uniform one final time. The weight of tradition pressed upon his shoulders more heavily than the ornate red tunic he wore. Today marked not just another Trooping the Color ceremony, but his first as the officer conducting the Major General's inspection, a role that connected him directly to centuries of British military heritage. The parade ground buzzed with controlled activity as over 2,400 officers and soldiers from the Household Division prepared for the annual celebration of the Sovereign's official birthday. Each movement was precise, each uniform immaculate, each piece of equipment polished to mirror brightness. The Welsh Guards, whose color would be trooped today, stood in perfect formation, their red tunics and black bearskin hats creating a sea of scarlet and shadow. Major General Geika walked slowly among the ranks, his trained eye catching every detail. The months of preparation had led to this moment when split-second timing and absolute precision would create a spectacle watched by millions worldwide. The soldiers stood motionless as statues, but he could sense the anticipation rippling through their ranks like electricity through wire. Behind the ceremonial grandeur lay stories of individual dedication. Private Williams, standing in the front rank, had spent countless hours practicing his drill movements until they became second nature. His boots gleamed from hours of careful polishing, and his tunic bore the faintest scent of starch from the regimental tailor's meticulous attention. Beside him, Corporal Thompson fought to suppress memories of his father, who had stood in these same ranks 20 years earlier, trooping the color of a different regiment. The inspection began with mathematical precision. Each soldier's uniform was examined, each piece of equipment checked, each detail verified against the exacting standards that had been maintained for generations. The Major General's experienced gaze missed nothing. The angle of a cap badge, the alignment of medal ribbons, the positioning of ceremonial swords. This was more than mere pageantry. It was a demonstration of military excellence that reflected the very soul of the British Army. As the inspection progressed, spectators began filling the stands surrounding Horse Guards Parade. Among them sat Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, an 80-year-old widow whose late husband had served in the Coldstream Guards. She clutched a small photograph of him in his ceremonial dress, taken during the 1960s, when he too had participated in this magnificent display. Her granddaughter Sarah sat beside her, seeing the ceremony for the first time, her eyes wide with wonder at the spectacle unfolding before them. The military bands took their positions with instruments gleaming in the morning light. The massed bands of the Household Division, numbering over 400 musicians, represented some of the finest military music in the world. Their repertoire for the day included traditional marches, hymns, and popular songs that would accompany the various phases of the ceremony. The drum major raised his staff, and the first notes of the inspection music filled the air, adding sonic grandeur to the visual magnificence. Television cameras positioned around the parade ground prepared to broadcast the ceremony to an estimated global audience of hundreds of millions. Director James Morrison sat in the mobile control unit, coordinating multiple camera angles to capture every nuance of the performance. His team had rehearsed extensively, knowing that this live broadcast would showcase British ceremonial tradition to the world. Each shot had been carefully planned to convey both the intimate human moments and the sweeping grandeur of the occasion. The Major General completed his inspection of the 1st Division, his satisfaction evident in the slight nod he gave to the commanding officer. Every soldier had passed muster, their appearance reflecting the pride they felt in their regiments and their dedication to maintaining the highest standards. The Welsh Guards color party stood ready, the regimental color silk flags that would soon be paraded before the Sovereign fluttering gently in the morning breeze. Security personnel, largely invisible to spectators, maintained constant vigilance around the ceremony. Detective Inspector Patricia Davies coordinated the protection detail, her earpiece crackling with regular updates from officers positioned throughout the area. The ceremony represented not just a celebration, but a significant security challenge, requiring seamless coordination between multiple agencies to ensure the safety of the royal family and thousands of spectators. As the inspection neared completion, anticipation reached its peak. Soon, the royal procession would arrive, and the ceremony would begin in earnest. The Major General took his position, satisfied that every element was in place for a flawless performance. The morning's meticulous preparation would now give way to the choreographed magnificence that was trooping the color, a tradition that continued to embody the very best of British military ceremonial excellence. The distant sound of hoofbeats on cobblestones announced the approach of the royal procession along the Mall. King Charles III, mounted on his charger noble, led the cavalcade with the bearing of a monarch who had waited decades for this role. His scarlet tunic of the Welsh Guards caught the sunlight as he rode, the weight of the crown jewels replaced today by the simpler but equally significant ceremonial uniform of his regiment. Behind the king rode other members of the royal family, their horses stepping in measured cadence down the tree-lined avenue. The Princess of Wales, elegant in her regimental dress, sat astride her mount with the confidence born of years of riding. Her children, watching from the carriage procession that followed, pressed their faces to the windows with barely contained excitement. Prince George whispered questions to his grandmother, Queen Camilla, about the soldiers they would soon see perform. The mall itself had been transformed into a corridor of pageantry. Thousands of spectators lined both sides of the broad avenue, many having arrived before dawn to secure the best viewing positions. Union Jack flags fluttered from every available pole and window, creating a river of red, white, and blue that stretched from Buckingham Palace to Admiralty Arch. Street vendors moved through the crowd selling commemorative programs and small flags, their calls adding to the carnival atmosphere. Margaret Chen, a tourist from Singapore, stood among the crowd with her teenage daughter, both overwhelmed by their first experience of British royal ceremony. They had planned this trip specifically to witness Trooping the Color, and the reality exceeded their expectations. The precision of the mounted escort, the gleaming harnesses of the horses, and the disciplined movement of the entire procession created a living tableau of monarchical tradition that seemed almost magical in its perfection. The household cavalry. Mounted regiment formed the escort, their cuirasses gleaming like mirrors in the morning sun. These elite soldiers, recruited from the Life Guards and Blues and Royals, represented the cream of the British cavalry tradition. Each trooper sat, perfectly upright in his saddle, his mount trained to perfection for ceremonial duties. The horses themselves, magnificent animals bred and trained specifically for state occasions, moved with the grace and dignity befitting their role in royal ceremony. Captain Alexandra Pemberton of the Life Guards rode in the escort, her mind focused entirely on the precision required for the formation. Every stride of her horse had been practiced countless times, every movement choreographed to ensure the procession moved with clockwork accuracy. Her family watched from the stands at Horse Guards, her mother clutching a handkerchief and fighting back tears of pride as she saw her daughter participating in this ancient ceremony. The procession passed beneath the canopy of plane trees that lined the mall, their leaves creating a natural cathedral ceiling above the royal cavalcade. The sound of hooves on tarmac created a rhythmic percussion that seemed to echo the heartbeat of the nation. Police outriders maintained perfect formation around the procession, their motorcycles purring quietly as they kept pace with the horses. As the royal party approached Horse Guards, the ceremony entered its most critical phase. Timing became everything, as the arrival had to coordinate precisely with the completion of the inspection and the positioning of all ceremonial elements. The garrison sergeant major, watching from his position near the parade ground, spoke quietly into his radio, confirming that all units were ready to receive the sovereign. The crowds pressed closer to the barriers as the procession drew near. Digital cameras and mobile phones held aloft to capture this moment of living history. Social media platforms would soon flood with images and videos of the ceremony, sharing the spectacle with millions who could not be present. Yet for those lucky enough to witness it firsthand, no digital reproduction could capture the full sensory experience. The sound of jangling harnesses, the scent of horse leather, the palpable excitement in the air. Young Tommy Harrison, just 7 years old, sat on his father's shoulders to get a better view. His eyes grew wide as he saw the king approach on horseback, the fairy tale quality of the scene making it seem like something from his storybooks. His father, a veteran who had served in Afghanistan, felt a surge of emotion as he watched the ceremony that represented everything he had fought to protect. The procession reached the entrance to Horse Guards Parade, where the ancient archway framed the scene like a picture. The king's horse stepped through with measured dignity, followed by the rest of the royal party. Guards in their sentry boxes stood at attention, their traditional red tunics and bearskin hats adding to the timeless quality of the moment. As the last of the escort disappeared through the archway, the crowds along the mall began to move, many heading toward the Victoria Memorial to secure viewing positions for the return journey. The first phase of the ceremony had concluded flawlessly, setting the stage for the magnificent display of military precision and royal pageantry that would soon unfold on the historic parade ground where British monarchs had been celebrated for centuries. The moment King Charles III entered Horse Guards Parade, the atmosphere transformed from anticipation to electric ceremony. The massed band struck up the national anthem, and over 1,400 soldiers snapped to attention with precision that sent shivers through the watching crowds. The king, still mounted on Noble, acknowledged the royal salute as centuries of military tradition came alive around him. The color party of the Welsh Guards stepped forward, carrying the precious regimental colors that would be the focal point of the ceremony. These silk flags, embroidered with battle honors spanning centuries of service, represented more than mere symbols. They embodied the soul and history of the regiment. Ensign James Mitchell, chosen to carry the Queen's color, felt the weight of responsibility as he gripped the staff. Behind him, the regimental color-bearer held the second flag, equally sacred to the Welsh Guards' identity. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Williams commanded the Welsh Guards on this their special day, her voice carrying clearly across the parade ground as she issued commands. Her regiment had spent months preparing for this honor, and every drill movement, every piece of ceremonial equipment, every uniform detail had been perfected. The guardsmen stood like statues in their scarlet tunics and towering bearskin hats, their disciplined silence speaking volumes about their professional excellence. The ceremony's ancient ritual began to unfold with mathematical precision. The Welsh Guards' colors were slowly advanced down the ranks of soldiers, allowing each man to pay his respects to these sacred emblems. This trooping of the color dated back centuries, when it served the practical purpose of showing soldiers the flags they would follow into battle. Today, it represented the unbroken chain connecting modern guardsmen to their predecessors who had served crown and country through wars, peace, and social upheaval. Among the spectators, retired Major Robert Ashworth watched through tears he made no attempt to hide. 40 years earlier, he had been the ensign carrying these same colors during his own trooping ceremony. His grandson, serving as a lance corporal in today's parade, represented the third generation of his family to serve in the Welsh Guards. The continuity of service, the passing of tradition from father to son, epitomized everything the ceremony celebrated. The massed bands provided a soundtrack of military magnificence, their music precisely timed to accompany each phase of the ceremony. The bass drums thundered across the parade ground, while the brass instruments sang out melodies that stirred the hearts of everyone present. Bandmaster Thomas Richards conducted with subtle gestures, his experienced eye ensuring that over 400 musicians maintained perfect coordination despite being spread across the vast expanse of horse guards. Camera crews worked with choreographed efficiency to capture every angle of the ceremony for the global television audience. Aerial shots from helicopters circling overhead provided sweeping views of the geometric perfection created by the assembled troops, while ground-level cameras captured intimate moments of individual concentration and pride. The contrast between the ancient tradition and modern technology created a fascinating juxtaposition of old and new. The king dismounted and took his place on the dais, his presence lending gravity to every movement on the parade ground. From this elevated position, he could survey the entire ceremony, his experienced military eye appreciating the countless hours of preparation that had produced this flawless display. Beside him, other members of the royal family watched with evident pleasure, their participation adding personal warmth to the formal magnificence. The color party began its slow march past the assembled troops, the flags held high as they moved between the perfectly aligned ranks. Each soldier's eyes followed the colors as they passed, a moment of personal connection to the regiment's history and values. The silence was profound, except for the measured tread of boots and the gentle flutter of the flags in the breeze. This was military ceremony at its most pure and powerful. Young recruit David Thompson, participating in his first trooping ceremony, fought to control his emotions as the colors passed before him. The months of training, the endless drill practice, the high standards demanded by his sergeants, all of it made sense in this moment. He understood now that he was part of something greater than himself, connected to centuries of guardsmen who had stood in these same ranks with the same pride and dedication. The ceremony reached its crescendo as the colors completed their tour of the ranks and returned to the color party's position. The precision of the movements, the dignity of the participants, and the grandeur of the setting combined to create a spectacle that transcended mere entertainment. This was living history, a demonstration of values and traditions that had sustained the British military through centuries of change and challenge. As the trooping phase concluded, preparations began for the next element of the ceremony, the march past, where each unit would demonstrate their drill perfection before the sovereign. The guards began to form up in their marching formations, their movements as precise as clockwork. The afternoon sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows across the parade ground and adding dramatic contrast to the scarlet tunics and gleaming brass instruments. The ceremony was building toward its magnificent climax, each phase more spectacular than the last. The march past began with a thunderous crash of drums that seemed to shake the very foundations of horse guards. The massed bands, now formed in their marching configuration, led the procession with military music that had stirred British hearts for generations. The Grenadier Guards stepped off first, their movements so synchronized they appeared to move as a single organism, each soldier's pace identical to his neighbor's, each arm swing perfectly matched. King Charles III stood at attention. On the saluting base, his hand raised in acknowledgement as each unit passed before him. His military training served him well in this moment, his eye automatically assessing the quality of drill, the precision of timing, the professional bearing of each soldier. These were his guards, representatives of regiments with which he had served and whose traditions he knew intimately. The pride in his expression was unmistakable as company after company demonstrated their excellence. The crowd fell silent except for the rhythmic crash of boots on tarmac and the soaring melodies from the military bands. Each spectator seemed hypnotized by the geometric perfection of the marching formations, the way hundreds of individual soldiers merged into flowing patterns of red and gold. Children pointed in wonder at the towering bearskin hats, while their parents explained the significance of the different regimental badges and the battle honors embroidered on the colors. Colonel Michael Davidson of the Scots Guards watched. His regiment approached the saluting base with intense concentration. Every step had been rehearsed hundreds of times, every movement drilled until it became automatic. His soldiers represented not just the modern British Army, but centuries of Scottish military tradition. Their tartan facings and distinctive dress marked them as inheritors of battles from Waterloo to Afghanistan, and their bearing today honored every guardsman who had gone before. The precision of the march past created a mesmerizing spectacle for the television audience worldwide. Camera operators tracked the formations with practiced skill, capturing both the sweeping grandeur of the entire parade and intimate close-ups of individual faces. The concentration etched on young soldiers' faces told its own story of dedication and professionalism, while veteran sergeants marched with the confidence born of decades of experience. Among the marching guardsmen, Lance Sergeant Peter Mackenzie felt the weight of family tradition on his shoulders. His father and grandfather had both marched in this ceremony, and their medals now adorned his dress uniform alongside his own operational service decorations. As his company wheeled past the king, he caught sight of his wife and young son in the spectator stands, their faces beaming with pride. This moment would become a treasured family memory, part of the ongoing story that connected past, present, and future. The mounted bands added equestrian elegance to the martial display, their horses stepping in perfect time to the music while the riders maintained faultless musical performance. The household cavalry band, mounted on magnificent black horses, created a striking visual as they passed the saluting base. Each horse had been trained for months to perform in this challenging environment, responding to subtle cues from their riders while maintaining formation despite the noise and excitement surrounding them. The international guests seated in the reviewing stands watched with fascination as this uniquely British ceremony unfolded. Ambassador Marie Dubois from France, herself from a military family, marveled at the precision and grandeur of the display. Her counterpart from Japan took careful notes comparing the British approach to ceremony with his own country's military traditions. These diplomatic observers would return to their capitals with stories of British military excellence that would enhance international relationships. The Irish Guards approached the saluting base with their distinctive shamrock badges gleaming in the afternoon sun. Their regimental mascot, an Irish wolfhound named Seamus, marched alongside the officers with canine dignity that delighted the crowds. The dog had been specially trained for ceremonial duties and seemed to understand the importance of the occasion, maintaining perfect pace with the human members of his regiment. As each formation wheeled past the king, the complexity of the choreography became apparent. Traffic controllers, invisible to most spectators, coordinated the movement of different units to ensure seamless transitions between formations. The timing required split-second precision, with each company entering and exiting the parade ground at exactly the right moment to maintain the flow of the ceremony. The final infantry formation completed its pass, and attention turned to the mounted elements that would conclude this phase of the ceremony. The Life Guards and Blues and Royals prepared to demonstrate their horsemanship skills, their mounts prancing with barely controlled energy. These cavalry regiments represented the pinnacle of British military horsemanship, their riders selected not just for their military skills, but for their ability to control powerful horses in challenging ceremonial conditions. The thunderous applause from the spectator stands rolled across horse guards as the march past reached its conclusion. Every unit had performed flawlessly, maintaining the exacting standards that made Trooping the Color one of the world's finest military ceremonies. The king's satisfaction was evident as he acknowledged the final salute, knowing that his guards had once again demonstrated why they were considered among the finest soldiers in the world. The ceremony now prepared to move into its final phase, the return procession that would complete this magnificent display of British military tradition. The afternoon sun reached its zenith as the ceremony entered its final magnificent phase. King Charles III remounted Noble, his charger stepping gracefully as the royal procession prepared to return along the Mall to Buckingham Palace. The masked Bands struck up, "God Save the King" one final time, the powerful melody echoing off the historic buildings surrounding Horse Guards Parade as over 1,000 soldiers came to the final ceremonial attention of the day. The procession formed with clockwork precision, each element taking its designated position for the return journey. The Household Cavalry Mounted Regiment wheeled into formation, their cuirasses catching the sunlight like mirrors as they prepared to escort their sovereign home. The king took his place at the head of the cavalcade, his bearing regal yet approachable, as he acknowledged the salutes of his guards one final time before departing the parade ground. Captain James Morrison of the Blues and Royals felt his mount shift restlessly beneath him, eager to begin the journey back to barracks. His regiment had performed flawlessly throughout the ceremony, and now came the final test, maintaining perfect formation while navigating the crowds and excitement of the mall. His father, watching from the family enclosure, remembered his own participation in this same ceremony 30 years earlier, when the Queen had been the focus of all attention. The procession moved through the ancient archway of Horse Guards, emerging onto the mall to find thousands of spectators lining both sides of the broad avenue. The crowds had swelled during the ceremony, with latecomers joining those who had waited patiently since dawn. Union Jacks fluttered from every available point, creating a patriotic canopy above the heads of the cheering multitude. The sound of their approval rolled like thunder across the royal cavalcade. Princess Catherine, riding alongside other members of the royal family, smiled and waved to the crowds with the grace that had made her beloved by the British people. Her children, following in the carriage procession, pressed their faces to the windows with undisguised delight at the spectacular reception. Prince George pointed excitedly at the mounted soldiers, already dreaming of the day when he might participate in such a ceremony himself. The Metropolitan Police had positioned officers at regular intervals along the route, their vigilant eyes, scanning the crowds while maintaining the relaxed demeanor that characterized British crowd control. Detective Chief Inspector Helen Shaw coordinated the security operation from a mobile command unit, her team monitoring every aspect of the procession through a network of cameras and radio communications. The ceremony represented a significant security challenge, but the professionalism of all involved ensured public safety without diminishing the celebratory atmosphere. Among the spectators, emotions ran high as people witnessed history in the making. Elderly veterans stood with tears streaming down their faces, remembering comrades who had served in these same regiments during wartime. Young families pointed out details to their children, ensuring that another generation would understand and appreciate these ancient traditions. Tourists from around the world captured images and videos to share with friends back home, spreading the spectacle far beyond London's borders. The massed bands, now in their mobile formation, provided a stirring musical accompaniment to the procession. Their repertoire included traditional marches interspersed with popular melodies that had the crowds singing along. Bandmaster William Patterson conducted his musicians while marching, his years of experience allowing him to maintain both musical excellence and military precision despite the challenging conditions. The procession passed beneath the canopy of plane trees that had witnessed countless royal ceremonies over the centuries. Each tree seemed to stand at attention, their leaves rustling in a gentle breeze that carried the sounds of the celebration across central London. The historic significance of the route was not lost on participants or spectators. Generations of British monarchs had traveled this same path, connecting the present ceremony to centuries of royal tradition. Mounted police officers flanked the procession, their horses trained specifically for crowd control duties. These animals, bred and trained for temperament as much as skill, moved calmly through the excitement, their riders maintaining constant communication with the central command. The sight of mounted police in their traditional uniforms added another layer of pageantry to an already spectacular display. The Victoria Memorial came into view, its marble magnificence providing a fitting backdrop for the climax of the procession. Queen Victoria's statue looked down upon the scene with imperial dignity, surrounded by the symbols of empire and achievement that had defined her reign. The crowds gathered around the memorial cheered even louder as the royal procession approached, their enthusiasm creating an almost festival atmosphere in the heart of London. As the procession neared Buckingham Palace, the anticipation reached fever pitch. The iconic facade of the palace, with its familiar balcony visible above the gates, promised the final act of the day's ceremony. The crowds pressed closer to the railings, digital cameras and phones held high to capture the moment when the royal family would appear on the balcony for the traditional RAF flypast. The ceremony that had begun with military precision on Horse Guards Parade was about to conclude with family tradition and aerial spectacle. The gates of Buckingham Palace opened like welcoming arms as the royal procession completed its triumphant journey along the Mall. King Charles III dismounted from noble in the palace courtyard, his ceremonial sword glinting one final time in the afternoon sunlight. The household cavalry escort wheeled into their final formation, their horses breathing hard after the long ceremony, but still maintaining the discipline that marked them as the elite of British military horsemanship. Inside the palace, preparations for the balcony appearance reached their climax. Staff members made final adjustments to ensure everything would be perfect for the traditional finale that millions around the world were waiting to witness. The Royal Air Force had been coordinating their flypast for weeks, with pilots rehearsing their formations over the English countryside to ensure split-second timing that would bring their aircraft over the palace at precisely the right moment. The crowds in front of Buckingham Palace had grown to enormous proportions, filling every available space from the Victoria Memorial to Constitution Hill. Families with young children sat on folding chairs brought from home, while teenagers climbed lampposts for better views. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation and celebration, the successful completion of the ceremony leaving everyone in festive spirits. Squadron leader Emma Thompson sat in the cockpit of her RAF Typhoon, leading the formation that would provide the aerial finale to Trooping the Color. Her aircraft, along with dozens of others representing different eras of British aviation history, waited at various air bases around London for the signal to begin their approach. The precision required for the flypast rivaled that of the ground ceremony, with aircraft from different services coordinating their speeds and altitudes to create a spectacular aerial display. The palace balcony doors opened, and the royal family stepped into view to thunderous cheers from the assembled crowds. King Charles III, now changed from his military uniform into formal dress, stood at the center with Queen Camilla beside him. The younger members of the family arranged themselves along the famous balcony, their presence adding warmth and continuity to the ancient ceremony. Prince George pointed excitedly at the crowds below, his enthusiasm infectious even from such a distance. The sound of approaching aircraft engines created a low rumble that grew steadily louder, building anticipation among the crowd. Mobile phones and cameras turned skyward as people prepared to capture the moment when modern military aviation would salute the monarch. The historical significance was not lost on observers. Aircraft that had defended British skies during wartime would now celebrate peacetime traditions in a display of national unity. Flight Lieutenant Sarah Chen, piloting a historic Spitfire, felt the emotional weight of flying over Buckingham Palace. Her grandfather had flown similar aircraft during the Battle of Britain, defending the very palace now spread out below her wings. The connection between past and present seemed tangible as she maintained precise formation with aircraft representing 8 decades of Royal Air Force evolution. The first wave of aircraft appeared on the horizon, their formations perfect despite the complex coordination required. Historic aircraft from the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight led the way, their distinctive silhouettes immediately recognizable to aviation enthusiasts in the crowd. The sound of their engines, different from modern jets, carried emotional resonance. For older spectators who remembered when such aircraft filled British skies in defense of freedom. On the balcony, the royal family looked up with evident pleasure as wave after wave of aircraft passed overhead. The king, himself a qualified pilot, pointed out different aircraft types to his grandchildren, sharing his knowledge and enthusiasm for aviation. The younger royals waved excitedly at each formation, their genuine delight adding human warmth to the grand ceremony. The modern jets followed, their sleek forms representing the cutting edge of British aerospace technology. The Red Arrow's aerobatic team brought up the rear, their distinctive red, white, and blue smoke trails painting the sky above central London in patriotic colors. The precision of their formation flying drew gasps of admiration from the crowd, while their colored smoke provided a dramatic finale that photographers and videographers captured from every possible angle. As the last aircraft disappeared into the distance, a moment of profound satisfaction settled over the scene. The ceremony that had begun before dawn with meticulous preparation had concluded with flawless execution. Every element, from the Major General's inspection through the march past to the aerial display, had demonstrated the very best of British military tradition and professional excellence. The royal family remained on the balcony for several more minutes, acknowledging the continued cheers from the crowd before gradually withdrawing into the palace. The spectators began to disperse slowly, reluctant to end their connection to this magnificent display of pageantry and tradition. Many lingered around the palace gates, sharing photographs and memories of what they had witnessed. In the days that followed, images and videos from Trooping the Color 2024 would spread around the world, showcasing British ceremonial excellence to a global audience. The soldiers who had participated would return to their regular duties, carrying with them the pride of having contributed to one of the world's finest military displays. The ceremony had once again proved that ancient traditions could thrive. In the modern world, connecting past, present, and future in a celebration of service, duty, and national identity that would be remembered for years to come.